I was told that in order to be righteous, I was a dung heap covered in snow.
Yeah, that's so
Okay.
terrible.
And Job was righteous, and he hadn't done anything. He didn't profess Christ. He didn't repent for his sins, right? He didn't, but he was perfectly righteous and he spoke correctly. And it was only through the journey through the book that I realized, well, that's because he held on to his own integrity. He would not lie to himself.
Right.
He would not do that. He could not do that. And that led me to believe that was why God said, have you seen my servant Job? Because he knew that Job wouldn't do it.
Yep. All right. So, everyone, I'm back here with Shari, and we are doing our part 2 of sort of going back. What did we call the first one?
We called it retrospective, but I think it's almost
Retrospective.
introspective at
The
this point.
introspective.
It's the introvert podcast.
Yeah. But I was just saying before I hit record, and then I said I got to hit record. I was just saying how I've been having these conversations like with Dr. Jim and with Ted, and just reiterating stuff that I've thought about and talked about before, but just to different people, and doing it again and again. It's been helpful for me. And then Shari, you've been doing the imagination stuff with George MacDonald, and you were saying that you've been doing the same sort of thing.
Well, yeah, I had that conversation with Dominic recently, and I was really glad that I retained as much information as I did, because I
thought it was really good. I thought it was impressive.
Yeah. So yeah,
but he knows George MacDonald stuff too, right? And like C.S. Lewis.
He's sort of familiar. I think mostly through me talking about it.
Okay.
I don't know about the fairy tales, if he's actually engaged with those. I never did talk to him about that, but yeah. So we were just talking about the benefits of having conversations with other people about our thoughts and giving ourselves a chance to, re-articulate. And, there's an ordering that happens, I think, too, and that when you do that, right, where the things start to take, maybe it's, maybe it's a pattern too, right? That, you start to, so I don't know. I mean, I always learn something when I have a conversation about what I'm saying. Even what I'm saying is revelatory to me.
Well, you were just saying also that because George MacDonald says, like, when you look at a fairy tale or a story or whatever, you see the meaning that you are able to see, and then that can change over time. You read something when you're a child, it means something to you, and that meaning's real, but later on you can read the same thing and it'll have a different meaning, or it'll strike you differently for different reasons because of where you are in life.
Right. And I'm really ruminating on this whole idea of the fairy tale in the face. So, and I watched this recent conversation with Dov Elbaum and Zevi, and in there he said, let me see, I have that written down here somewhere. He said,
was that the part where he was talking about the idol as being a mask? And then
yeah. So he says, I am that I am means that I am open to all possibilities. It's like the face of a human being. And then I was right away, I was like, oh, because George MacDonald says a face is just a fairy tale is just a fairy tale, as a face is just a face. But then Dov goes on to explain that when you're in conversation with somebody, when you're in relationship to them and you face them and you're facing each other, those faces are changing constantly.
Right.
Right. And I think that gets exactly to what you were saying about, like George MacDonald also puts it in terms of where, where you are in your life, your development, right? Which is, I think his, yeah, I'll just leave that alone for now. But yeah, so this, yeah, and your face is the same thing, right? Like it's an ever, and actually George MacDonald says that it's the ever changing symbol or veil that God hangs in front of the unseen spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Calls it an ever changing thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think I'm starting to understand better now that the ever changingness is the meaning. The meaning is ever changingness, right? It's constantly renewing itself and revealing itself to you in new ways all the time.
Yeah. I wonder if like because the face is so tied to how we're thinking and how we're feeling. Like most people, unless you're train yourself, like your face just automatically displays what you're feeling and what you're thinking.
Yeah,
Like
and you can't really help it.
you don't, yeah. And it takes like training to like where you got to become a psychopath where you are a psychopath
You'd
to
have to be
like,
one. Yeah.
yeah, to like manipulate your face in certain ways. And then people can read facial expressions, and those are always telling of what's happening internally. And like even the smallest things, like the
Yep.
turning of the mouth and the eyes and where you're looking, and and whether you're sitting still or you're kind of moving back and forth and all that stuff, like it conveys something that's happening on the inside. And I was thinking about that in terms of like Matthias Desmond about resonating.
And
And
the
it
mirror
seems like,
neuron.
yeah, and when you're face to face, like literally people can sync up their
Yeah.
their neurons together so that they're on the same page, sort of.
Yeah, literally.
So, and well, I did a word search for face in Job, and it's not like the word face is in there quite a bit. It's not like a heavy theme. Well, at least it's an unexplored theme for me. But Job does say like God's face is hidden from me, and I have a cloud. My face is, I have like what do you say? Yeah, there's like a cloud in front of my face, so I can't see. And
Yeah. And God
and
talks about obscuring. Who's obscuring?
mm-hmm. Yeah, and so there's this idea of like knowing, and Satan says at the beginning, Job will curse you to your face.
Mm-hmm.
Once you do these disasters, Job will see you for who you truly are, and he'll curse you for it. And Job, when all this happens, he doesn't think of it as a revealing of who God really is. He sees it. He just sees the paradox of it all. He's confused because it's not
Well,
the
he
God.
does so. Yeah, here we go. Here we go back to Job.
So he immediately is like, God's hidden from me.
Yeah,
And
but then he.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm
Go ahead. Go ahead.
because I just got an insight, and when Satan says that to God, if he sees you for who you really are, he'll curse you to your face, right? He's not lying. Like, think about the implications of that statement. Because we always think of Satan as evil, right? Oh, he's just saying evil things. He's trying to confuse the issue. But what if he's just saying things for what they really are? Like, God is that paradox, right? So, and then Job does see God. He says, I've seen you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how many times seen or seeing pops up in Job if you search that word, because
Well, it's like one of those words that shows up like all over the place
because that's also to me indicative of the face, right? Because you can't see anything if you're not looking at it, if you're not facing it. And there's another interesting aspect to this, to the tying this back to George MacDonald, because when he describes the ballroom scene in Lilith, he describes these skeletons as being faceless, but their eyes are living.
Mm-hmm.
and their eyes are more pronounced in within their facelessness.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're malicious, they're more malicious looking. If they're sad, they're more sad looking. Like they're really, you know, they kind of, I guess, like a diamond on a black piece of velvet. They really pop, like these eyes, right? And the
Right.
feelings that are attached, because
Yeah.
the eyes are the windows to the soul. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's through the eyes that you actually get to see what's going on in there, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know why
Well,
I
and
brought.
there's that weird thing in that scene where like they can see, but they don't have a face to which to be seen by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to
And that
reciprocate.
gets into Lewis's novel on Till We Have Faces, because she has the veil. She doesn't have a face to be seen by. And so she like veils herself and people assume all these things about her. She's beautiful, she's strong, by how she acts, but she doesn't have a face yet to be seen by. And so there's something like you can see, but you aren't seen or something like that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, maybe this gets
Curious.
to what you were talking about with Matthias Desmet, that that there's a reciprocation that's happening, an unseen reciprocation that's happening. Like he talks about the experiments that they did in real life conversation, how quickly people can finish another person's sentence
Mm,
or pick up on an idea. And those like there's hardly any gaps in the conversation,
mm,
um, because they're actually, like you said, synced physically
right.
with the other person.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it seems to be the case.
So why wouldn't that be any different if you were face to face with God, right? Like what is
Right.
that, right? What does that do? What does that
Yeah.
do for you?
It's not only seeing God as he truly is, but it's also you being seen and,
Yeah.
and as you truly are.
Yeah. I mean, I can really understand why Lewis really puzzled over this in that novel, because
Yeah.
it's really quite fantastic.
Yeah. Well, and I was in my conversation with Dr. Jim, like we kind of talked about the hiddenness of Job's righteousness, and then didn't not in that conversation, but we've talked about before the hiddenness of God's wisdom. And that has something to do with this, like this face thing. Because if the face is revealed, then it's sort of like the soul has a chance to be revealed as well. There can be this resonating that can possibly happen. But if the face is hidden, then the internal conditions are also hidden. And um yeah, that's all really interesting to me, because I think that's what a lot of or that's a main part of Job. At least I see it now. I'm I'm resonating with it now.
That's where you're at right now. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
speaking of that, like remember when we first started talking about Job, I would always get choked up talking about the ostrich. Like I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that was like a point where I would like I like start breaking down. And then like I could talk about the ostrich now without breaking down at all.
Oh, interesting.
And but then later on it was the lions. I'd start
Mm-hmm.
breaking down when I was talking about the lions. And I'm just like,
That's a very curious little barometer you have going there.
it's super strange. It's really weird, like which things are making me choke up or not.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's deeply resonating with you in some way, right? Like deeply.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I asked the question in my conversation with Dr. Jim, is that like I kind of think like people ask like what does the book of Job mean? And I think that's kind of like I I don't know, first of
Well, you
all.
know what I think,
But
Jess?
but I think like what is it doing? And like it does something in me. Like it works on me.
Well, because
Um,
there's I mean, you've told your story before, and so I feel like I can say this out loud that, you experienced a withdrawal of God in your life, right? And that withdrawal was for the purpose of making you real.
I'm a
And that's
real.
exactly that's exactly what Job is about,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like he says, I can't see your face. And the ostrich too, it's like, oh, this is a seemingly cruel act, and yet God calls her, apart from that, he still sees her as something beautiful, right?
Right.
So so these things are connected, but in a very mysterious way. They're connected. And when somebody experiences that withdrawal of God, I think that there must be a sense of both joy and sorrow, right? Because if you understand that it's for your betterment, right? That it's something that's going to make you more real. I think that's the best way to say it.
Yeah.
Then there's a joy in it, but then there's also a goodbye involved, right?
Yep.
My youngest daughter, she whenever we had company that stayed for whatever, a visit, 3 days or a week or whatever, and then we'd say goodbye, she said, I hate goodbyes. She just couldn't handle them, right?
Yeah.
They were just the
I
worst.
I always hated them. Like we would do, because my parents were missionaries, so we would do like these short-term mission trips when I was a teenager, and sometimes they'd last like a month or two. But like when you're a teenager and you spend a month on a mission trip with other
Oh
people,
yeah,
you're
they're like your family after that.
like after a few weeks, like you're best friends. And then
Mhm.
after 2 months and you have to say goodbye forever, like you never see these people.
Yeah.
And like it was just like the never ending tears and wailing and and all the you know just cheesy stuff you do to say goodbye to people and the
Yeah.
feelings that you're feeling. um yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
it was hilarious.
Yeah. I had a neighbor in Telegraph Creek. He used to say, visitors are like fish. After 3 days, they start to stink. And I thought that's terrible. And now at the age that I'm at, I'm like, yep. Nice to have you. Nice to see you go. No.
So anyone visiting Shari should stay for 3 days.
No, it's not that bad.
That's funny though.
Yeah.
Well, um, what should we talk about?
Uh, well, what should we talk about? I mean, has anything out of these two conversations that you've had of late, has anything reemerged that you think maybe you need to look at more closely, or you haven't understood, you realize you don't understand as well as you thought you did, or anything like that?
Well, I was kind of just struck by the feeling like I just want more attention to be placed on the book as well as like the work we did on our podcast, which it's gotten, like, I get these wonderful heartfelt messages from people. um you know and so I just love that. And then um but like I can't talk about this forever. Like what else am I going to talk about? I'm also thinking along those lines. I'm like, when does this start to wear thin? um
Well,
or
I don't
like,
think it ever will. Like, if I'm honest,
mhm.
because I mean, to talk about the Book of Job in its entirety might wear thin, but the Book of Job is always going to be, at
The
least for
subject
me,
matter is,
it's
yeah.
always going to be running in the back of my mind, because it seems to cover just about everything that we experience as human beings, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so and so if we're, like, I just recently had a conversation with somebody about grief and loss, and of course, well, immediately we're in the book of Job,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
No, right.
And but I like to take George MacDonald's cue. His, one of the things that I've really um, appreciated from looking more closely at the way he thinks and the way he writes is that he'll take that um, that mannequin of the Book of Job, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
that structure, and then he can clothe it with other things. And in doing that, he can write the most amazing fairy tales. And this is why he's a good fairy tale writer, because he takes something that is always true and he clothes it with something that already contains a meaning,
Right.
right? And the meaning is given by God.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's multivalent, right? And then, so I don't know. I mean, there is a thought there, Jess, that perhaps now with that structure in place, you can start creating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Imagining, which is the duty.
Right.
The duty of the imagination is to seek out the things of God, which is what you're doing when you're digging into the book of Job,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um,
Well,
and
I'm doing that music project, and that's a whole meditation itself. Like it's
there you
going
go.
back through the book, but it's going on a, like I'm going. Part of it is just the technically to just do the song. I've got to listen to it over and over again because I make a part, I listen to it, I make another part, I listen to that together, I edit it, listen to that. So like I'm through chapter 10. So I've listened to chapters 1 through 10, like I don't know how many times. Like it's ridiculous. But I'm planning on keeping going on that. But that's a whole meditation that you know I don't know if it's bringing necessarily new insights, but I always sort
I
of
think
had
it's
this desire.
transformative.
Yeah, I've had this desire to like internalize the movements that are happening,
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's
and
good.
and so there's like these movements that happen through the chapters and between the ideas and stuff, and there's a certain order that's not like just like a it's not like a list of things that order, but there's a certain order that things play out, and sometimes when we talk about it we say this and that, but it actually happens in this kind of specific order, and so there's a movement between that, and just like you said a second ago, like I think that's transformative.
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's at least it helps me be integrated or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, like you talked about that story with Dr. Jim about the guy at your church who, your response to him, you saw yourself as one of Job's friends,
Yeah,
right?
it was wild.
And I think that that's a bulwark in a sense for you or for anybody who makes themselves more aware of what, because it's the story of what it means to be a human being, right? And that's on every level. Like every character in that story is a real human being, right? So, um, I think just using your story as an example, it gives you an opportunity to catch yourself and examine, like
Yeah.
pull away, right, and have a look at this and go, whoa, whoa, and then you're in the story again.
Yeah,
You're in
it's
it,
wild.
and when that
Yeah.
happens, it reveals new things to you. I think it
Hmm.
has to, right? I think it
Yeah.
revealed something about your friend to you right at that moment.
Yeah, it totally did. And my attitude towards him changed. And I even kind of told him some of this. And he's always been nice to me because I don't know, I've just been able to talk to him pretty easily. But the next Sunday I saw him, he was like super friendly to me and like, like above and
Well, yeah,
beyond.
yeah,
So it's
because
like,
it feels
oh,
like he's seen.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's all we want.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And if he feels stuck somewhere, like Like I have this theory that the book of Job is to help you kind of get unstuck from those things. Like those,
Yeah.
just the things that involve in just the hardships of being a person,
Yeah.
including, trauma and all that.
Yeah. And yeah. I mean, Job was definitely traumatized.
I know, right?
Definitely traumatized. Yeah.
I want to talk to Chad at some point because me and Chad had a good conversation on the Voxer um about AA
Yeah.
and history of it, because they started out just reading the book of James before they had their whatever the big book is, and then their all their AA stuff that they ended up developing. But first they just were going through the book of James, and then they kind of I need to talk to him about this more, but he was basically, the way I understand it was, is that they were kind of watching themselves as they were going through this process. And then they kind of figured out what they were doing to help alcoholics
Right.
through this thing. And, you
They were
know,
watching the whirlwind of dialogue. This is interesting,
yeah.
because this is this way of abstracting yourself out, and this might get us in all weird directions and maybe even take us off course a bit. But I was I was talking to Jedediah about this dream that I had. And in the dream, there are these two witnesses, and I don't really know what they mean. And him and Nate did a thing on the apocalypse on the Grail Country, that their last conversation. And in that conversation, they were talking about the two witnesses in Revelation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really listening, because I was like, okay, what does this even mean? Like what? This is not just like, it's not obvious what these two witnesses are, right? And then in my dream, these two witnesses, I don't see them, but I know where they are, and they get killed by a serpent in my dream, right?
You're just like dreaming Revelation.
and all the other parts of my dream are fairly obvious to me, like I can understand them. But that part, why is that even in there? Right.
Mm.
So anyway, I'm talking to Jed about imagination, and I got to the story of my glowing orbs, right? And me thinking about dying, right? So there's
Mm-hmm.
this, and this is like the you that sees you talking to Ray.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's the same idea. It's this other part of you that can zoom out and watch this go down,
Yeah.
from a distance. And then Jed said to me, "Are you talking about the two witnesses?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting."
Huh.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's really interesting. Now I'm trying to think of why I brought this up. Something that you said. I have to rewind the tape and see.
leave a comment later. I don't even remember.
Oh, why did I say? Well, it came to me when I was thinking about, when you were talking about how, how you were able, or I was talking about how you were able to see yourself talking to your friend, and it placed you back in the story, right? And then you could correct yourself, right? You could correct
Yeah.
that interaction, and it revealed something to you about you, but it also revealed something to you about him, right?
Yeah.
You saw him as Job,
Yeah. And
right?
I was Eliphaz or
And you
some.
were Eliphaz, right? Or Bildad or whoever.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, anyway, I don't know. That's why I said this could take us really off course, because
Well, it's an
there's
interesting thing.
something
I found
interesting about
myself
that.
in the story. Like all of a sudden I was in the story.
But you were also observing yourself in it at the
Yeah.
same time,
Yeah.
which is really like, is that the two witnesses?
Oh, I get what you're saying about the two witnesses now.
Yeah. Is like there's a psychological something going on. Like I talked about it this morning with Nate a little bit. There in psychology, when you dream,
Mm-hmm.
um, so your houses are often edifices are often you.
Psyche.
Usually a house is you, eh, as a psychological being. And the upper level, like the attic or whatever, is usually your consciousness. And the lower levels, like a basement, is just subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my dream, I'm in a mall, which is like all kinds of human beings go into a mall. All kinds of things are happening in a mall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the witnesses are on the top level. Like they're actually in my consciousness, right?
Uh,
I think
yeah.
about it that way. And then I go down to the basement to save a child because the serpent entered the mall
Hmm.
and it was seeking out the witnesses to kill them. Didn't I tell you about this dream?
No, I didn't hear about it.
Oh, such an incredible dream. And it's just been nagging at me. I mean, should I tell you the dream? It's a little
Sure.
okay. You can cut this all out because, yeah.
No, I'm
Anyway,
leaving it in. This is what we tune in for.
okay. So I'm somehow I'm in the mall. I'm observing that outside of the mall, there's a group of men and they're all dressed in black. And they have this huge crate, wooden crate. And they're conferring amongst each other on how to open it up and how to let this thing out. And they're talking about it needs to kill the witnesses and all this stuff. Okay. So then they decide, and the mall is abandoned. It's not functioning as a mall. So all the stores are empty, but there are people living in it. And they're people who I don't know, these are just the things in a dream. They're good. They're not like squatters, they're not drug addicts or alcoholics or, they're good people. I don't mean to be, I don't mean to say drug addicts are good people, okay? They're just people who have fallen on hard times and they're homeless. And so they've taken residence in these stores. And two of those people are called the two witnesses. And they're
Oh.
up and they're living in this empty store in this mall. And so these guys push this crate in and they look official, these guys, okay? They're not like gangsters. They look like they're wearing suits, like men in black kind of suits.
Mm-hmm.
And they push the crate in and they lift the lid and then they go out and lock the doors and they're on the outside looking through the glass.
Mm-hmm.
And this huge serpent comes out of this crate and it's just like Godzilla style, huge, right? And it goes up these stairs that are in front of it. And its head is in this searching mode. It's going back and forth and it's looking for these two witnesses. And it's on the top level, already kind of down the hallway, and its tail hasn't even gotten out of the box yet. That's how big it is. Okay. And I'm like, okay, well, it can't see me. And I there was a little child, about a 4-year-old girl, and she was downstairs, and I knew I had to save her so that this thing didn't kill her. So I ran and I got her, and she was wearing a little nightie, little white nightie, and I was carrying her so that she was sitting on my hands with her feet dangling in front. And I could feel the warmth of her body and the softness of her skin. And I went up these stairs, and while I was saving her, the snake killed the two witnesses. Okay, so it happened. I didn't see it, but I just knew it happened. And then I go up these stairs, kind of like these, stairwell instead of taking the elevator kind of stairs. And I get up to this stairwell and there's it's a bedroom and there's these two teenage girls on it in their bedroom. And they're kind of bouncing around on the beds and talking, laughing and being teenage girls. And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know this was a bedroom. I'm just passing through." And I went around their beds and continued up the stairs because it was still the staircase.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went up, got to another landing, and there was another bedroom. And there was an old woman in a bed. She was sitting up, leaning against the wall. And I looked at her and she smiled at me. And then there was a mirror on the wall. So she's here.
And all this time you're carrying the child, right?
And the whole time I'm carrying this child. Yeah. And I look in the mirror and the woman starts transforming. So her hair gets really long and she's young, and then it gets shorter and she's middle-aged. And then she transforms into a lion. And then she transforms into an ape. And she's wearing these little round glasses. And they always stay on her face because she has them on, right? So in every transformation, I know it's still her because of the little round glasses. Mm. And I look at her and she's just the little old lady in the bed. And then I look in the mirror and it's just like all this stuff going on, you know? And I said, "Who are you?" And she looked at me and she just smiled, this really warm, glowy type smile. And I knew, well, I didn't know, but it was afterwards I realized, well, she's me, right?
I was about to tell you that.
And they're all me.
They're all you.
They're all me.
Yeah.
And behind her, the staircase goes up, continues up, but then it stops right at the ceiling. So I'm at the top level. So my thinking about this was, okay, so these two witnesses are on the top level and they have to die for some reason. And I go down to the basement and I grab the child and I ascend with it.
Mm-hmm. That's your integrity. The child's your integrity. That's the glowing orb.
Yeah. Yeah. The spark.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, like Dov talks about. He talks about the spark. Remember when I sent you that clip? You should play that clip.
Oh. Which,
because that's directly related to Job for me.
A bit of a picture of how this manifests.
There is no sin. The only sin that is to risk your spark of God, which is inside of you, by doing false actions and false prayers and false deeds. That's the only sin there is, or to do it to another person. And it's another way of thinking about sin. Even chapter 3, for example, Yaakov Frank is a better example. They were sinning so they can be closer to God. Okay, mitzvah באה בעבירה. עבירה לשמה, yes. But in my opinion, as I see things, it's not a sin. The terminology of sin is problematic. What is sin?
Mm-hmm.
Sin is not to obey, or sin is not to obey your inner voice, the call of God within you.
Yeah.
We look on the sin in a different way.
Yeah, so this is exactly Job's integrity to me.
Yeah, I've thought about this. I've never talked about it though.
Because we talked about the sinless fall, the sinless repentance, right? And the reason we have to frame it like that is because people think sin is doing bad things. And he's saying in that clip, that's not what it is. It's not doing bad things. And I've always stood by that, actually, over the years.
Even in my Protestant evangelical stuff, people will say, like, just because you do good deeds doesn't mean you're not sinning.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what he's
saying. Because you could be putting them higher than God. You could be putting a good higher than God. Like, we have that. Like, it's not a stretch but this idea of like that inner spark, because we still haven't totally, oh my gosh, we haven't come to terms with with how much damage the idea of total depravity has done.
Mm-hmm.
Because total depravity kind of
well, it extinguishes the spark.
It can. I mean, I think you can make an argument in certain technical senses, whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah. Theologically, maybe
internalize it as their piece of crap. And this is what, Luke did with his POS theology stuff and got in trouble, caused an uproar. But really, like, that's the problem that we've got to kind of confront is that spark of God, the Spirit of God in you is the thing that's true. And that doesn't mean that you're infallible. It just means that your true essence is that of a child of God. And then fallen or a sinner is just, it's something that's happened. And
it's like you said,
has made a way.
Yeah. It's like you said, you repent of your childhood, but that doesn't mean it was the wrong thing to do. You know what I mean? So, yeah. And then of course they go in that conversation, they go from there to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? Because that is the line of thinking that you end up having to go down, right? Because and this to me all directly relates to the way I read the book of Job, and why it was so revolutionary to me in my thinking was because I was told that in order to be righteous, I was a dung heap covered in snow.
Yeah, that's so terrible.
And Job was righteous, and he hadn't done anything. He didn't profess Christ. He didn't repent for his sins, right? But he was perfectly righteous, and he spoke correctly. And it was only through the journey through the book that I realized, well, that's because he held on to his own integrity. He would not lie to himself.
Right.
He would not do that. He could not do that. And that led me to believe that was why God said, "Have you seen my servant Job?" Because he knew that Job wouldn't do it.
Yep. Yeah, he knew. Yeah. And we even talked, I remember we talked about this because one of the striking differences between the way Job's friends talk about people and the way God and Job talk about people is that the friends will always denigrate man in sort of this move to elevate God. They think they're doing something good by denigrating man to elevate God. And even Satan has this sort of ideas like men are garbage.
Yeah, we have to keep a space between them, right?
Yeah.
And Father Stephen Freeman wrote a book about this. It's called The Two-Story Universe, right? Where God lives upstairs and we live downstairs. And right. And we're not the only religious faith that believes that.
Yeah.
A lot of people want to keep that distance intact and that's exactly what Job's friends did. They wanted to keep the distance between men and God intact because to be close to God was to be close to fire.
It's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
Yeah.
It is
or it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, love is terrifying. Like Nate and Laura did a thing on courtly love recently, and it's all very romantic and it's all very cute and it's all really nice and right. But it's also terrifying. I think it's interesting. There was a time when people were just, willing to say, "I love you," which meant, "Will you marry me?" And we live in a time now where people aren't willing to say, "I love you." Like, I don't know what they're waiting for, but somehow there's an intelligence in that at the same time, because because they've obviously weighed the cost of what it means to say it, right?
Mm.
Because when you say that, there is a cost. Like, you become lost in the other, right?
Mm.
So, and like George MacDonald says, our God is a consuming fire, right? That's how he ends. How he ends I think it's the Child in the Mist.
Mm-hmm.
With the love loves unto purity, right? And that which isn't lovely, it makes more lovely. And in order to do that, it empties itself so that it can be found in the object itself, right? And that should definitely terrify us.
Mm-hmm.
And Job's friends were terrified. Like, whenever he started calling on a face-to-face with God, they were just like, stop.
What are you doing?
Yeah. And Eliphaz is like, Elihu is like, oh, here it comes.
I know, right?
Here it comes.
I know. Yeah.
We knew this was going to happen.
Get sucked up in the tornado. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, man, what a dream that was.
Like I said to Nate, I don't think it was just about me. Like, it's a both and, it was of course about me, but it was also about something else, because the two witnesses are in Revelation. That's the only place you really find any talk of them, apart from the whole idea of having two witnesses. There's that.
Oh, right.
But
are those two ideas tied together? Having two witnesses to...
Oh, they are definitely tied together. Yeah. And then the transfiguration is also tied into all of that. Okay. It's all because that Moses and Elijah are like the two witnesses, right? Mm-hmm. And Moses and Elijah are also symbolic of other things, the law and the prophets, heaven and earth. To me, that's how I'm looking at them. Like I said, because Elijah and John the Baptist are compared to each other, right? And John the Baptist is a voice crying in the wilderness. And I had this thought one day that I was like, okay, is John the Baptist a voice crying in the wilderness, or the wilderness crying with a voice?
Mm-hmm.
Because that would be Sophia, right?
Mm-hmm.
The wisdom of God, and the marriage of heaven and earth.
Mm-hmm.
You see, there's heaven and earth symbolism in there. I think it has to be.
Yeah, I think so.
Because Elijah runs to the wilderness too. See, that's why. Mm-hmm. And so does the woman who's having the child in Revelation. She runs to the wilderness.
Yeah.
And so it's all floating around in my head.
Did you listen to Peugeot and Aidan Hart talk about the what is it? The Transfiguration?
No, I did not.
On Jonathan Peugeot's channel, it just came out today.
I gotta watch it.
Yeah, so it's what's the lady's name? Margarita Mooney Clayton. She's at Princeton Theological Seminary. So she's hosting the two of them, and she's just asking questions. She's Catholic.
Okay.
But they're just riffing on the Transfiguration the whole time, and it's pretty good.
Well, I'll just say this quickly. There was this other conversation that Zevi had on his channel. I'm trying to remember who it was with.
Mm-hmm.
It was about becoming one with God. I don't remember the guy's name. It's also really good. So it's the idea of theosis, which is kind of foreign in the modern sense to Judaism today, but he shows how it was very present in Jewish mysticism in the past, and still in Kabbalah. And of course, light plays a big role in as an indicator of becoming one with God. This is what happens to Moses, right?
Mm.
When he comes face to face with God, his face shines, right? And that's also present in the hesychastic tradition, in Orthodoxy, and you know, saints are said to glow, and and
The uncreated light.
It's an indicator, right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, and then he was talking about food in Jewish mysticism, and food is materialized light. Okay, so think and it is photosynthesis.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but it is also on a mystical basis. And then right away I'm like, oh, the Last Supper, right? The Passover meal. So they're sharing food, and this food is materialized light. Well, what happens before that? Quite a ways before that, but the transfiguration happens, where Jesus actually becomes light.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then he says at the Passover meal, this is my body. And I thought, if Jesus came from a mystical tradition, then it would have been obvious to those who had eyes to see and ears to hear. Okay. Mm. Those who understood the tradition, it would have been obvious to them what he was saying, and why the transfiguration, and why the Eucharist, really. Right. This is my body and this is my blood, right?
Yeah.
And the whole idea of food and materialized light. Anyway, that's another little ramble, but
mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's all connected.
Also, yeah, I know. Well, and even in Psalm 104, with the work of man is to produce, the work man produced with his hands is wine, bread, and oil.
Yeah.
And that's what Jesus does. And so it's like materialized light, but it's then taken, and it's the work of the work of man, right, also mixed in there. And then it's given up. And so it really is the incarnation.
It's a demonstration of heaven and earth. It's always about the marriage of heaven and earth to me. Mm-hmm. Like the sun grows the food and the man makes the bread, right?
Yeah.
And then he eats it and it becomes a part of him. It's incarnational. So this, the thing that comes down from heaven to earth dwells inside of him.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Materialized light.
Yep.
Literally.
Well, and even the bread is for strength, which is for earth, and then the wine is for gladness, which is like for heaven.
And the oil is mercy.
Oil's mercy.
Yeah. At least in the Orthodox Church.
Mm-hmm. Because you anoint with oil when you're sick.
And the word in Greek means, it comes from the same word as mercy. The word for olive oil. Yeah. And olive oil was used as a healing balm.
Right.
For wounds, right?
Yeah.
So when you pour oil on something, you're healing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what mercy is. It's reconciliation. Mm-hmm. Because that's what healing is. Healing is when two broken things come together, knit themselves together, which again is the marriage of heaven and earth, right?
It's all the same thing.
It's all connected. But I will watch that thing with Aiden Hart and
it's good.
Yeah, and I can't recommend enough the series that Zevi did at the Hartman Institute. Every single one of those conversations is amazing.
All right, I'll link them in the description. I'll link all the stuff we talked about.
Yeah.
And
there's so much to learn, Jess.
I
We have
know.
so much to learn.
I know. Further up, further in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think Job is a great what do you call that? Launch pad. That's what I think of it as. It's a good launch pad, right? It's a good foundation from which to go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's perfect. I'm still, it's like I'm still so thankful that book's in the Bible. Like it's a miracle it's in there as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I'm really glad that you have felt the calling to make it known to other people, because like you said, I think it is healing. Nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants to go through a difficult time. And when they are, all you can actually do is accompany them. You can't alleviate any of the pain. It's
Mm-hmm.
like these are the things that are our own, right, to
Mm-hmm.
carry. And but you can accompany them. And I think that's what the book of Job does.
Well, I even think there's some like just like AA as they were going through the book of James, and they actually like stumbled upon something as they stumbled on the cure for alcoholism, which no one knew how to figure out. And so not only is it I can't even say the word.
Accompanying.
Accompanying the I
That's a
can't
weird
say it.
English word.
Not only do you accompany people,
Yeah.
but there's the chance that you actually find something healing that actually just, you know, I read a story about the discovery of insulin, and
Mm.
the first success they had with it was there was a whole floor of children who had diabetes, and they were all in diabetic comas. They're all just unconscious, and they administered insulin shots to them, and they just waited, and eventually all the children just got up. They got out of their
What
coma,
a miracle.
and they just got up, and they were fine. They just
Yeah.
needed their insulin. And it was like this, like, just I forget the name of the people that came up with it, but they just put in the work, and they stumbled upon something and discovered insulin, and then they did it, and it was like this little miracle. And now you don't hear of people in diabetic comas anymore. And you know,
Yeah.
so I think we can, you know, I think that's what science is. Science does this whole process of like you sort of stumble, you accompany people, you stumble along, and as you ruminate and whatever,
Yep.
you may actually find something that is solves a problem.
Yeah. And for Rudolf Steiner, the idea of science marrying itself to spiritual principles, to the Christ, as he would have put it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's no telling what you would know in the end.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, there's no telling. There's no
No.
telling. Like, Goethe knew about the metamorphosis of plants 50 years before it was discovered by science,
Right.
for that very reason,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
So, and Steiner sees that as an outcome, as a final outcome, as for humanity, a final stage of evolution, when science and spirituality are one, right?
Right. Right.
And that is a marriage of heaven and earth as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe
Well, Shari,
mercy is the mediator, right?
I
Mercy
think,
is the
yeah,
mediator.
I think so, because you have to go in with mercy and empathy and trying to see face to face with whatever it is to resonate with it and be able to discover those things. So,
Still don't know why the two witnesses have to die.
well, if one of the witnesses is you, your consciousness, and the other witness is you watching your conscious self, then it's something like descending into like.
Well, see, I'm wondering if it's left and right hemisphere, the two witnesses.
It could be.
But I don't know. Yeah, that may be way too reductionist, but I'm still puzzling it.
If anyone knows what the two witnesses are, leave it in the comments.
we almost solved the face thing with McDonald. Just throw it out there to the public.
I know. Public will solve it. All right, I gotta get going, but Shari, thank you again.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye, Jess.